Hello and welcome back to Radical Disruption. This is part four of my series of uncovering what has been going on in the year of 2024. And today I have a special guest with me, which is my husband, and we're going to be talking about our journey with investing in franchise stores. So, my first question off the bat is what made us decide to become franchise owners in the first place?
Yeah, so we did a lot of research beforehand. I actually looked into probably 50 different franchises and
And just 50 different businesses in general. I feel like for 6 months, every single day, you just had a different idea of what business to start. And then you decided franchises. And then from there, narrowing it down.
right, yep. I originally wanted to do Crumble, but it's really hard to become a Crumble franchisee unless you know someone. While I was looking into that, I just stumbled across Dirty Dough, who had just started franchising, and we reached out and set up a call.
For those of you who haven't listened to the podcast or in a while or haven't listened to all the episodes, I talked about Dirty Dough a while back, and that's the franchise that we ended up investing in. It is a cookie store. So if you're familiar with Crumble, if you're in the United States, you're probably pretty familiar with Crumble. It's cookies. Dirty Dough is basically just a Crumble competitor. And as Gabe was saying, it was just easier for us to get into that franchise. It was brand new. Basically, yeah, it was a startup. I mean, we were one of the very first 3 franchise owners in Dirty Dough. And I guess the question is, how did you decide, or how did we decide on the franchise that we invested in? So how do we decide on Dirty Dough, and what made it seem like it was a good opportunity?
Well, we have friends that own Crumble locations, and they're doing really financially well. We thought that we could jump into the cookie space and become Crumble's number one competitor and tap into that. So that was a big reason that we decided to do cookies. And another reason was we knew that it was a startup and we thought that we could grow with the startup.
It was kind of like one of those things where we thought that we were getting in the door at the right time, where the industry was scaling, but that's not how it ended up being, which we'll talk more about in just a minute. But in Utah, which is where we live, cookies are huge in Utah. So it might seem weird to dive into a cookie franchise store, but in Utah it's super big. Crumble was started in Utah, and Dirty Dough headquarters also in Utah, and like Chip is in Utah, which is another cookie store. So cookies are very big in Utah, and Crumble it took over nationwide. I mean, they have 3,000 stores or something crazy like that.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, they have a lot of stores. And so we thought, okay, well, if we get into Dirty Dough at the right time and grow with the company, then it would be a huge opportunity for us. And our ultimate goal was to build it to a point where we would just sell all of the stores and just take that chunk of cash and probably invest it into something else. But before I get ahead of myself, we ended up opening up our very first store in Layton, Utah, which is about 45 minutes away from where we live. And that was in, November of 22?
Yes.
So I think we had come across Dirty Dough about 4 months prior, maybe 5 months prior.
Like July.
And then started building out that store from scratch in Layton. And that was the very first store that we opened. And then from there, all the rest of the stores were where?
Houston, Texas. Yep, we had 4 stores that we opened in Houston that were operational, and we had 4 other leases that we had signed, planning to build more. And then we also had several other franchise territories that we were planning on building further in the future.
And what was the timeline on all of that?
So we signed leases and opened our first store within about 6 months of opening our Layton store. And then
the first store in Texas.
Yep. And then we opened 3 more, basically 1 month after the other. So we opened 4 stores in the span of 8 months.
What was that scaling so quickly?
It was a lot of work, especially being in Houston. I was there a lot, like every other week. And we even hired my little brother to move out there and manage construction. And even with that, my dad and I, who was one of my partners, we were out there a lot.
Yeah. And I am asking him these questions because I didn't really have anything to do with the building of the business side. It was all on you, and obviously we were investing in it, but I just kept running the business that all of you know as listeners, and he was running the Dirty Dough side of things. So that was wild to be, for me to be working and then for him to be working, and that was just quite the journey. But what are some challenges that we faced in running the stores and opening up so many stores in a short amount of time?
For us, the construction side of it, building out the inside of the stores, was really frustrating. We thought we had chosen a really good contractor, but ended up not being so great. So we had a lot of fights and struggles with them and a lot of delays. But
A lot of permitting delays too. Like when you're in food, there's just so much permitting that you have to go through, and you're going through city permits, and that just takes so long.
yep.
What else though? What about running into challenges with corporate? We didn't talk a lot about the reason why we were sold on Dirty Dough in the first place, which is the whole business model. You want to go back to that?
Yeah, so the business model is another huge reason why we chose Dirty Dough.
I want to tell them about the difference between crumble and Dirty Dough.
Yeah, so Dirty Dough would receive shipments of frozen dough weekly, and all we'd have to do is throw that dough in the oven and then throw some toppings on it, and we could sell it. And from a business owner standpoint, that is very attractive because Crumble makes all of their cookies from scratch. So they have to do really extensive training with their staff and have a lot more staff to be able to make those cookies and sell them. Whereas with Dirty Dough, you just need 1 or 2 employees because all they're doing is pulling the cookies out and baking them essentially. It's very simple. So for us, being semi-absentee owners, that was very attractive.
The business model that we were sold on with Dirty Dough is that you could basically get the store up and running, and then you could be very hands off because there's not a lot of room for error in how the cookies are made. And so you would just hire a manager. And so that was the thought process there. But what are the struggles that we started running into with corporate pretty early on in the journey?
Yeah, I could say a lot of negative things about corporate, but they're a startup. I still consider them a startup, even though they've been bought out. They didn't have anything together. They didn't have their stuff together, if you want to say that. They
didn't have a lot of structure. It was very much figuring things out, which when you are a solo entrepreneur for figuring things out and it's just like affecting you, it's a little bit different than when you are corporate and you have all these franchisees that are buying franchise stores and building, and you're not just responsible for just yourself. So there was a lot of structural issues in terms of organization, in terms of who was managing what in the corporate aspect of things.
Right. When we toured the facilities and, met with the owner, the founder, there was a lot of things said that weren't actually true in terms of their processes, how they run things, and how they make the dough. But they were making a lot up on the fly. And we weren't really able to see that going into it. We did not benefit from that, to say the least.
There was a lot of over-promising and under-delivering, which in any business, that's like the worst business model that you can possibly be in. You always want to under-promise and over-deliver, and it was just the complete opposite. And so that was pretty hard on our end. So next question is, when did we first realize that the business wasn't working the way that we expected, like the business model?
Yeah, so we knew that basically since we opened our first store in Utah that it was struggling, and we knew that they had a lot of growing pains. So we knew from the beginning that it was hard for them and it was hard for us, but I think we just put a little too much faith in ourselves and them, corporate, to be able to turn things around. And that's why we continue to build the stores in Houston. And we also believe that Houston was a lot better market than Utah. There was no saturation there yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, in Utah, there's literally a cookie shop on every single corner. And so moving into Houston, you have a huge demographic there. Well, a huge population of people and not quite as huge of a population of cookie stores. But I guess you can talk about the timeline of selling stores too. We sold the Utah store before we ever opened the Texas stores.
Yeah, so the Utah store, basically right off the bat, after like month 2 or 3, started losing money, which we weren't super surprised about. We were just disappointed. We put that on the market. We put it up for sale pretty quick, and we still lost our shorts on it. We sold it for, I think, $50,000, and it cost us about $300,000. Luckily, we got out of the lease, and then we just focused all our efforts on Houston after that.
And what metrics and signs were you looking at in terms of like loss? Did you do anything to try and make it profitable before selling, or?
Yeah, we spent just on the Utah store tens of thousands of dollars on marketing, training. We did everything that we could think of and that as a business owner you should do to make that store profitable before we sold it. But another issue with that one is corporate oversold the Utah market. So there were stores within a couple miles of ours, and they were just cannibalizing each other. Most of the Utah stores have actually closed down at this point.
Yeah. There's like, what, 2?
Yeah, there's only a few that are still open.
But there was at one point like 15.
Yeah.
Which is a lot within basically 2 valleys.
Right.
So then, opening up the Texas stores, when did you decide to cut losses and I guess get out of that?
Yeah. I had 2 partners. One was my dad and one was a family friend. And they are both well off. So they were willing to spend a lot more money to try and make this work than we were. And we still spend a lot of money. But I personally had lost faith by the time we had opened our first store in Texas, because we had very disappointing sales right off the bat, even though, again, we had spent tens of thousands of dollars on marketing, pre-marketing the store, trying to prep the Houston market. And we had already signed several leases at that point. So we decided to go ahead with 3 more, still with the hopes that corporate would be able to lower their costs so that we could actually make money when we sold the cookies, because one of the big reasons we were losing money is our cost of goods was too high. And that just means that our cost to sell the cookie to the consumer was higher than it should be. Our margins were very small. When it was all said and done, we were actually losing money on all the cookies that we sold. Even though we sold a great amount of cookies, they were too expensive coming straight from corporate. So after we opened the 4th store, actually I think it was before we opened the 4th store, we decided that we would halt all further operations, all further development.
And that was after cutting down employees. That was cutting every single cost possible, and the stores were losing how much a month on average?
Yeah, depending on the store, but like $5 to $10,000 a month per store they were losing. We only had one manager that was managing all 4 locations, and we only had 1 or 2 employees per store, and we were spending
working at one time.
Right, working at a time. And when it was all said and done, we had spent like over $150,000 on marketing, depending, it was via social media, mailers, and everything. We
hiring an agency as well to run it. It wasn't like,
yeah, we hired an agency to run ads for us, and we went to schools. We did everything,
door knocking.
Everything that you should have. We went door to door trying to promote our business, and It was just impossible to make money because our cost of goods were too high. It didn't matter how many cookies we sold; they were just too expensive coming straight from corporate.
Yeah. And what did the process look like selling the franchises?
Honestly,
That's been this entire year. So that's what's been behind the scenes this year. Is it's been months and months and months of trying to find someone to buy, and then finding someone to buy, and negotiating, and yeah, I'll let you say more about that though.
Yeah, it's basically taken a whole year to sell the stores. We didn't even sell them; we gave them away.
Yeah. Sell with air quotes. Right. Literally gave them away for free.
Right. When you sign a lease, it's either a 5 or 10 year lease normally on a commercial building like that. And we obviously had signed leases on all of them, and you sign a personal guarantee, meaning if you default on the payments, your business defaults on the payments, then you are personally liable. So we couldn't just default on the payments, or it would have crushed our credit. We would have had to file bankruptcy, blah, blah, blah. So we kept the stores open as long as we could.
Still losing 10
grand a month per store. Yep. And we were advertising them for sale all over the place, brokers, and really just got lucky that there was another franchisee that was also in Texas and in another city.
A franchisee with Dirty Dough, so within the same franchise.
Right. He saw that they were for sale and reached out, and he ended up taking over the stores and over the leases. So really, we're super blessed that we even found someone to take over the stores, because most franchisees right now are just closing the doors and trying to sublease. So we feel super blessed that we were able to even give them away.
Yeah. And that was for the 4 stores that we had leases to, the 4 stores that we had opened, but there were other stores that we had leases to. And then we also had franchise rights to other stores as well. So
right.
There was a lot that was going on there. All that being said, this is not an episode to be a downer on everything. So from your perspective, and I'll share from my perspective too, but what are the lessons that I guess you have learned from this journey? And things are almost like pretty much fully closed off now, which is like 2 years after originally opening like the first store. So really 2.5 years from when we originally started the journey, but it's been quite the journey and hundreds of thousands of dollars lost. So I guess what from your perspective are the lessons that you've learned?
That's a tough question, because I've learned countless lessons. Some will say that these lessons are good to learn while we're young and we can take risks, which I agree with. Yeah, there's countless lessons I've learned. One of the big ones probably is jumping into a startup and fully jumping into it. Obviously, people jump into startups all the time and do great. Just probably next time use a little more caution and probably not scale quite as fast. We didn't go into any debt doing this, so that wasn't a lesson that we learned, but it was just a good reminder to try not to go into debt if you don't have to, because if we were in debt, it would be scary. We'd be paying on those payments for years and years. So yeah, that's probably a couple of the lessons I learned. There's so many. I could sit here for an hour and say all the lessons I learned.
Yeah, I think on my end, it just makes you really grateful for how digital product-based businesses are run, in the sense of basically no overhead, huge profit margins, as long as you're running things the way that you should be running them in a business. Obviously, you can definitely get to the point where you have no profit margins for sure, but it just makes me really grateful for this business model and the fact that I can work from home and have such big profit margins. And yeah, and it just makes me laugh sometimes too, because I'll get direct messages from people and they're like, well, I can't invest in something that's, $47. And I'm like, how lucky are we to live in like a day and age where you can build a business online for such small amount of money? Like even $1,000 to start your business is such a small cost in comparison to what it would cost to go out and build really any brick and mortar business. If we're just talking about one singular business, starting that up, you're looking like minimum $50,000. And that's with the hope that business succeeds with having put so much money into it. And so I just think we're so lucky in the online space to be able to run things the way that we run things. So I don't know if that's necessarily a lesson, but I think for me, it was just like a lot of gratitude. And I would also agree with you in the sense of whenever you can, don't go into debt. I would say that to really any business owner, like try to build things out as much as you can without going into debt. Obviously, if you are building out a brick and mortar store, it's going to be a little bit harder unless you have that cash on hand. And thankfully, because of how my business does, we were able to not go into debt because of that. But yeah, I would say that's a huge lesson for sure. Now, my question to you is if we had to do it all over again, what would we do different?
Not do cookies.
What's next then?
What's next? I don't know. I'm enjoying being a stay-at-home dad right now and day trading. I don't know. Maybe real estate, maybe start another business, maybe something that's not so capital intensive right off the bat, but just exploring.
The wounds are still very much fresh from that Dirty Dough loss. So we're just building up our funds again.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about trading though. You don't have to say much, but just
Since I'm a stay-at-home dad, I have a lot of time on my hands, and luckily we do have some cash still in my brokerage account, so I just learning how to day trade. Maya's dad actually is really good at it. He's teaching me a lot. It's nice. It's a lot easier than running a cookie shop. I just have to make a few clicks a day and make my money that way.
Yeah, I would say that's another thing for me. I mean, I wasn't in the day-to-day of Dirty Dough, but I definitely watched you in the day-to-day of Dirty Dough, and not even just the traveling aspect of it, but just the amount of phone calls and like problems you were handling with employees and even manager, like so many problems. And it just, another thing that just makes me grateful for a digital product-based business is, I don't know, there are still problems, don't get me wrong, but I would say the amount of problems that you struggle with versus the amount of problems that I have, it's probably like an eighth. There's just a lot. I mean, you're handling a lot of people, you know, it's
people bring problems and fires. You're just putting out fires all the time when you have people.
Yeah, for sure. And just for any digital product-based owners that are listening, I think for me, and I would say probably for just us in general, the thing that I've taken away from this experience the most is your business doesn't make you wealthy. What you do with that money is what makes you wealthy. And so this was one of those opportunities where we were investing a lot of the money that I made from my business into something that we were hoping would create a lot more wealth. Though it didn't, it doesn't stop us from continuing to invest in different opportunities. And so I think that that's just something to be aware of, is like, yes, it's nice to have money in the bank and it's nice to be able to pay for things and not go into debt. But ultimately, if you want to be wealthy, you need to be investing your money into something that
will make money.
Yeah, that makes your money multiply. And even better if it can be in a way that is as hands-off as possible. Obviously, I don't believe that anything in life is ever truly passive income, but investing in an opportunity that is as hands-off as possible is going to change your life, especially if you start doing it now, even in small increments, investing into whatever that might be. And there are so many different opportunities that you can invest in. It doesn't have to be franchise stores, and we would deter you from that decision. Obviously, there's so many people out there who have been successful investing in franchises. Everyone has their own experiences, but just go out there and start learning. There's no harm in getting started, even if it's you putting $100 a month into stocks or whatever it might be, or, starting to save up to buy your first investment property. So just thinking about more of the long term. Again, it's so awesome to be making money now, but what are you doing with that money that's going to make you money in the future? anything that you would leave with?
That was very well said.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, go ahead and shoot me a direct message or an email. I appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next episode.